Hello, MCU fans! Today we're going to take a look at whether or not there are some hidden secrets in the Daredevil Born Again opening scene. Oh my, there is so much we need to talk about. And right off the bat, I want to thank Chadwick Myers, because I don't think I would have even done this video if not for the ideas Chadwick shared on Discord. So thank you, Chadwick. You're amazing. So there will be spoilers for episodes 1 and 2, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a March contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. Okay, so let's start by talking about Dumb Benny. Remember, Kirsten and Foggy were talking about him while they were hanging out at the bar at Josie's in that opening scene, and she says, "What about Dumb Benny?" And he's like, "Oh, you heard about that, huh?" And she's like, "Everyone has heard about that." The guy rips off a bonded warehouse, gets caught on surveillance, and then he tells the cops he found 20 cases of Lafitte Rothschild on a subway? So, Lafitte Rothschild is a very valuable wine. Not sure how valuable that wine that this guy stole was, but as an example, a 1969 Chateau Lafitte Rothschild holds the world's record for the most expensive bottle of wine sold at auction for $233,000. That better be some really good wine. But anyway, he had 20 cases of it. All right, so Foggy says, well, Benny is a unique individual. And Kirsten's like, Benny is an idiot. And he's like, well, he's going to walk, you know. So, okay, what did we learn so far? We learned that, well, Benny is an idiot because he robs the place and gets caught and then comes up with a stupid lie. But for some reason, Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige have decided to represent him. Okay, so we got that. So then Foggy steps outside for a private conversation on his phone, but Matt uses his enhanced hearing to eavesdrop. So he hears Foggy saying, what are you talking about? And then Foggy says, Benny, slow down. I'm literally around the corner. I'll be there in 5 minutes. But Benny says there's someone downstairs. So what I think is really cool, notice how the screen perspective is changing here. So look at this. At this point, Matt's listening to the whole room because we see it go to this wide perspective. So he's listening wide to everything. Then he narrows in when he focuses on Foggy and his conversation, and the screen changes to narrow in as well. I love that. But anyway, so Benny is very worried because there's someone downstairs. Okay, so Matt goes out to ask Foggy what is going on. And Foggy explains after that thing in Red Hook, he said he was getting threats, so I stashed him. So Red Hook is where the warehouse is located where Benny stole that wine. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Red Hook. It does exist in the real world. It's like a borough, a district, a neighborhood in greater New York City. It has been mentioned in the MCU a couple of times in both Iron Fist and in Punisher, but it was really the Red Hook Pier that was mentioned, and it was just kind of a location, nothing special going on, really. And it was mentioned in the Legion series, of all places, and no spoilers, don't worry, but when they're talking about Legion, they mention after what happened in Red Hook. So an incident occurs with Legion. And of course, there's another famous mention of Red Hook. That was in the Dark Phoenix movie. Notice the Red Hook police. And even in the comics, Red Hook has come up. It's the secret headquarters for the Green Liberation Front. Hydra had a secret base in Red Hook, and after revealing his identity, Captain America moved to Red Hook. So I don't think any of these references or mentions have anything to do with what's going on in Daredevil Born Again, but I just wanted to bring them up for completeness. All right, so then Foggy explains that Benny is stashed away at his apartment, which is just down the street. And he basically apologizes to Matt, saying, look, I didn't tell you about this because I didn't want to give you an excuse, meaning, of course, an excuse to become Daredevil. Of course, he does have to become Daredevil as he heads towards Foggy's apartment, only to hear on the phone that Benny is now saying, Foggy, he wanted to know where you were, with the he being Bullseye. So ultimately, I think this was a setup to lure Daredevil away so that Foggy and Karen were left unprotected. And in fact, we do see that now Foggy gets shot. But we need to talk about this. So notice the blood splatter. The way that it's shooting out makes me think that he was shot from this direction, right? I mean, tell me in the comments if you think I'm wrong, but the shot had to come from this direction. Well, that is very interesting because Bullseye is actually across the street. This is him first chucking the smoke grenade, which of course he throws inside the door of Josie's, and then here he is now lifting up his gun and saying, hello, Karen, as he's just about to shoot her. But let's look at this aerial view of the situation here. This is when, of course, Daredevil throws his mask down, but Bullseye came from this direction, across the street, right? Because that's where he chucked that smoke grenade into the door. But Foggy was shot from this direction. Now, I know Bullseye is really tricky, but I don't think he could make a bullet angle like that. I don't think Bullseye shot Foggy. I think someone else did. Really interested in your comments on that. So I just don't think it was Bullseye. All right, so then we see that Foggy is down and that Karen is trying to save his life, but seemingly his heartbeat stops because that's why Matt just loses it, right? Looks at Bullseye and screams, "Why? Why?" And all Bullseye does is just chuckle in return and then pats him on the shoulder. I don't know if you can see his hand there, but he's literally just pats him on the shoulder. Very interesting, right? I mean, he doesn't say, "Because I hate Foggy," or "I wanted to get back at you." Again, I don't think he shot Foggy. I think someone else did that, and then Bullseye maybe was part of this scheme, but wasn't allowed to talk about why Foggy died. So then Daredevil, of course, chucks Bullseye off the roof, and he lays there bleeding out on the ground as, of course, Foggy is laying there with his heartbeat stopped now and seemingly dead, right? And in fact, it's really interesting because Bullseye opens his eyes, and I remember my first thought was, how? This is not Jason, right? How is he alive? In fact, how is his skull not crushed? But I am beginning to wonder, was more of his body than just his spine replaced with metal? Because that looks like metal coming through his scar, where his flesh has been ripped open there a little bit. So what's your thought? Did he get more than just his spine replaced? Very interesting. Okay, so obviously Matt is distraught and is convinced Foggy is dead. I mean, he heard his heartbeat stop, so you can't fake that emotion, right? He is distraught over Foggy's death. And in fact, we see a full 1 year later, after Foggy's death, he still got the program from Foggy's funeral. So they had a funeral and everything. By the way, I did translate the Braille, and it just says the same thing the words say, "In loving memory of Franklin Foggy Nelson." All right, so then Matt goes to speak in court about the impact of Foggy's death, because of course this is Bullseye's hearing. And keep in mind, you are under oath when you go to these. So he says, "Justice won't be served because I won't get to see Foggy again." In fact, we don't get to see Foggy again today, tomorrow, or ever. Now, the reason I mention this is under oath is Matt has great respect for the legal justice system, for the sanctity of the court. There's no way he would be lying in court. He believes he will never see Foggy again. That's really important. All right, so then it's worth noting that Dex has nothing to say in his defense, which I think is interesting because I don't think he even shot Foggy. I mean, if I were him, I'd be like, hello, I may have killed some other people, but I didn't kill Foggy. No, he's not saying anything in his defense. So that means a couple things. Either he did actually kill Foggy, or he's been paid to not disclose anything. Just like on the rooftop, he had nothing to say. It's very interesting. He has nothing to say here. So I think he's part of some bigger scheme, which we're going to talk more about as we go through this. All right, so a very fair question is, did the Kingpin have anything to do with this? I don't think he did, because remember, at the end of Daredevil Season 3, Matt said, "You'll keep my secret, and you won't harm Karen Page or Foggy Nelson, because if you do, I will go after your wife." And then when they asked him, "Well, do you trust he'll keep his word?" Matt's like, "Well, I trust that he loves Vanessa." So with that in mind, that's why the Kingpin said, "I had nothing to do with Foggy's death. I kept that promise." Now, of course, he could be lying, right? But he's talking to the guy who knows when you're lying. So either he has figured out how to regulate his heartbeat to trick Matt, which is possible, or he actually had nothing to do with that death. Now, he did benefit from the death, because remember, when he was running for New York City mayor, he said it was almost a year ago now when those cops in that bar were murdered by a vigilante. I love how he turns Bullseye into a vigilante. Really? Really? But anyway, he definitely benefited from the situation in multiple ways, because Matt stopped being Daredevil, and because he's able to turn this into his fight against vigilantes in general. So I do think Kingpin benefited. I just don't think he was behind it. In fact, if you remember the timeline that I went over in my breakdown for episodes 1 and 2, the most important part is it was May of 2025. With his eye injury mostly healed, he went to confront Echo, and then she messed with his mind, remember? And then on the flight home, which really lapped into June of 2025, he considers running for office, but he disappears for quite some time. Well, it's only 4 months later that Foggy is killed. So I think he's still off trying to figure out what Echo did to him, right? He's off in hiding wherever he went. I just don't think he had anything to do with it. However, could Vanessa have been involved? Okay, so remember, during couples therapy, they're asked, tell us what you want from this session. Vanessa, why don't you start? Well, she says, until very recently, we ran a complex business. Then Wilson left. Of course, that's the whole Echo situation. Disappeared, really. and I took over the business. And then he returns, and I really don't know how I feel about that. So I think she would just be fine if he went away, because she was doing a great job of running the business all this time. That's again why I don't think he had anything to do with it. But this is an interesting statement. So remember, when she's talking to the 5 families, they start arguing. One of them says, you cross Sunset Park and you got to pay. And the response back is, no, not heading to Red Hook. And they're like, Red Hook's exempt? Since when? Well, she comes in then and says Red Hook is exempt from any taxes, tolls, or other payments. Red Hook, right? She's talking about Red Hook. That cannot be a coincidence that the whole warehouse thing, that Benny was involved in, was also in Red Hook. So clearly she's in control of all of New York, including Red Hook. So did she set this situation up? Did she convince Dex to go after everybody, but then maybe had somebody else be the one that killed Foggy? We're still not sure why, but it seems like she's in control of all of this, right? Set up the whole Benny thing, set up the whole Dex thing, etc. Okay, so now let's move to crazy theory time. Did Foggy really even die? Okay, so remember, at the beginning of the episode, they're walking out of Nelson, Murdoch, and Page, which you can see here. And of course, that's the same Nelson, Murdoch, and Page that they were going to found at the end of season 3. Here's what's really interesting, though. We do see briefly the address, and the address is 468. Now, a lot of times, these numbers refer to comic issues, but unfortunately, there is not a Daredevil 468 because as of issue 380, the series stopped, and they later rebooted the series, but 380 was the last issue. However, in the rebooted series, volume 2, if you will, issue number 88, which if you add 380 and 88, you get 468, which is that number, the comic talks about the secret life of Foggy Nelson. Okay, so what's that all about? Well, we learn he's on the phone, this is right at the very beginning of the issue, talking to Ben, or he thinks he is, saying, it's me, it's Foggy, I'm not dead. Right? But then the phone is cut off, so he can't finish the conversation, and somebody says, we couldn't take a chance after you tried to call Mr. Urich last night, so we're monitoring all phone activity. You're in protective custody for a reason, Foggy. Okay, so he faked his death, and he's in protective custody, witness protection, right? Then he even says, well, who would even know? My friends already think I'm dead. And the response is, and so does the rest of the world. You're safer that way. Trust me. So, wow, the number of their address of Nelson, Murdoch, and Page is a comic reference to an issue where Foggy fakes his own death. And by the way, the one that was behind his fake death was actually Vanessa. Isn't that crazy? Now, the rest of the storyline goes into very different territory than we're going to see in Daredevil Born Again. I mean, basically, it was to frame Matt Murdock and replace him with Iron Fist, and none of that's going to happen. But isn't that interesting that we're pointing to an issue where Foggy fakes his own death? And then we learn this. Foggy might be coming back for season 2? Like, what? What's going on now? So in the Phase Zero interview, Brad Winderbaum, my man, Brad, he tells us everything, right? He's asked the question, so when you say there's no story without Karen and Foggy, is that really where we're going now? And he says, without going into spoiler territory, well, we'll see if it's a spoiler or not, but he says, I will say that both Deborah and Eldon are coming back for season 2. So the bottom line is this. This is the head of Marvel Television and Animation. He's not going to spoil something. He wants us to know Foggy's coming back for season 2. Now, maybe that's in flashbacks, right? Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe Foggy's death was faked. So how might they fake his death? Well, there is a precedent. Remember in The Winter Soldier, Nick Fury had his death faked. But here's Black Widow saying, they cut you open, your heart stopped. And he says tetrodotoxin B slows the pulse to 1 beat a minute. Banner developed it for stress. So, okay, there is precedent in using, drugs and other means to totally fake a death. Could they have faked it so much that Matt wouldn't have known about it, though, with his enhanced hearing? I mean, possibly. Maybe it's even more powerful than whatever they used on Fury. Because definitely, like I mentioned before, Matt thinks Foggy is dead. He testified in court that he's not coming back. So Matt thinks he's dead. Everybody thinks he's dead. But is he really? Is he really? That's my question for you. What are your theories about Foggy? Do you think he died here? Do you think he faked his death? Who do you think shot him? Because I don't think it was Bullseye. Who was behind the whole plan? Is it Vanessa? Is it someone else? Oh my word, there is so much going on in this opening scene, and I am all here for it. I cannot wait to learn more about this. So let me know your theories. Are we even going to learn the answer in this season? Or is this something that's going to be kind of like the cliffhanger when, like, maybe in episode 9, Foggy shows back up? Hi, Matt. Oh my word. Love to get all your thoughts on this. Leave your comments. I will read and respond to all of them because I really, really want to hear what you think. So don't forget, March contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. And we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And then I always love to mention the Discord. The spoiler section is going to be really interesting after this video drops because we're going to be talking about this in detail. So I will leave a pinned comment so you can join us as well. 2,000 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and we would love for you to be part of it. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.